phone, and I am on I'm actually have a day off, and so I just thought I would pop on and do this meeting real quick, but I can't see you guys. I can only see you one at a time, and I can't figure out how to change that. So so I'm a little disadvantaged to identifying you other than by voice as to how you're speaking. But so I'll call the meeting to order. Sarah, do you want to call the roll?
You bet. So we've got Dave Bartlett, County Board Chair. We've got myself, Criminal Justice Coordinator. We've got Chris Corpola, Human Services Director and Chair of the CJCC. We've got Katie Shalley, Clerk of Courts. We've got Judge Christina Meyer. We've got District Attorney Andrea Nodoff and CJCC Vice Chair. We've got Sheriff Bigg. We've got Chief Atkinson. We've got Judge Jim Peterson, and it looks like we've got two of our guests on one of our action items. Looks like we've got Anton and Alicia joining us. And I have some other folks on, I'm going to admit, we've got Michelle Barrow with DOC. We've got Amy Sanchez, not sure. We've got Tracy Fisher with the ADRC for an action item. And then we got somebody on a phone. We'll see who that is here. We got a big group today.
Sarah, Amy Sanchez is with BWJP. She is our CEO, and I believe she is also calling in from her phone. So that's what, so those two are connected together.
Thank you for that clarification.
Absolutely.
All right. I would entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from February 16th.
So moved by Kevin Bigg.
Kevin, get a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Dave. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Otherwise, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. I don't imagine that we have any public comment, but just checking.
No, we don't.
Okay. So I asked Sarah to put back onto our agenda. I know that she's been providing a written report each month or each time that we meet. But I get a little concerned that we all have busy lives and people don't necessarily read those reports. So without her going into all of the detail that's in the report, I did ask her to resume doing a brief oral report on the activities of the CJCC over the last couple of months. Sarah?
Sure. So just to briefly kind of highlight some of the activities, we did start to develop the new work group. So there's that methamphetamine strategy. So we did have a pre-meeting to the official kind of kickoff of that meeting once we get it approved through the CJCC. We've also been working to look, we had another meeting to get together to talk about our CSEF grant. That's a Department of Justice grant to purchase digital evidence systems. So I'll talk about that in a little bit on the decision that was made out of there for approval. We've also been spending a good amount of time with some of our partners and some of those partner activities. So with Chief Atkinson and the Menominee Police Department, really trying to get the QRT, the quick response team, started and developed, and the COSUP work group that Chief is going to lead up. So really just working to kind of form that up more. The CJCC did have the opportunity to present the annual report for 2021 at the March County Board meeting. So that was just always a good opportunity to do our highlights and kind of encapsulate what the year in a review. So one of the things later on our agenda is the SMASH board. So the 2021 data. That's in the packet, just opportunity for you guys to soak it all in, and we'll be talking about some of the highlights at our CJCC meeting. So I also just want to highlight there's going to be some upcoming training opportunities that a number of you are already interested in. The Wisconsin Association of Treatment Court Professionals is going to be having their annual conference in May, and this year it is in person, which is pretty exciting. So we've got family treatment court teams and our treatment court teams planning to attend. And then there's also a Department of Human Services opioid, stimulant, and trauma training that is going to be also, I think, in the second week of May. Health Done Right has offered a couple of scholarships for folks to attend, but Chris with our local human services departments also offered to cover the cost of that training for some interested parties. So we know that Chief Atkinson was interested and some of his officers, and we know that Jill Gamaz over at Arbor Place had some of her staff interested in attending. And that was a purely virtual opportunity. So if you're interested, I'll send you some more information so you can look it over. And if you're interested, we can sign you up. So I think I'll pause there unless there's any questions on the staff report. All right, silence is golden. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, we have 3 action items. The first, actually, I'm going to flip these around, I guess, because in the interest of Tracy's time, I think just looking for some buy-in and potential letter of support, I think I'll ask Tracy Fisher from the ADRC to speak with us briefly. She would be 6C regarding what she needs for a grant funding position or application that she's working on. Tracy?
Hi, I'm Tracy Fisher. I'm the newer ADRC and APS manager for Dunn County. I know some of you, but we recently have become aware of a partnership for a grant that would provide elder abuse training and services to our county in addition to what we already have. The partnership, the grant would actually be written by the Wisconsin Department of Justice. And apparently it's been something that they have had on the eastern side of the state for 3 years, and they're looking to expand to our area. Right now, counties that are interested in participating are ourselves, Dunn, La Crosse, St. Croix, and Polk County are the counties that have expressed interest. But basically, the grant would provide us most likely an elder abuse advocate that would be fully funded by the grant, and training for a couple of different departments. Adult protection in human services. There's a strong desire for police training. There would need to be a commitment amongst the sheriff, city police, and our municipalities to be willing to participate in training. It's an 8-hour training that could be broken up, and the training needs to be performed over 2 years. So, they talked about like a 2-hour training once a certain period of time. The prosecutor's office, and optional but desired, is also the judiciary. The federal agency that's granting the money is the Office of, I'm sorry, it's a federal agency, and it's regarding abuse against women, but it's open to, it's not just targeted towards women, the services. Each agency that is participating would need to be willing to have one of their staff members be trained, and then it's a train the trainer approach. So the additional training going forward would be provided by the person who was willing to be trained, and the police training would be provided locally, but the prosecutor's office and the judiciary would be sent to training that would be paid for by the grant. The last training, one was in San Antonio and one was in San Francisco. So there are some asks for this grant to participate in this grant project, but it would provide, again, more significant training specifically regarding elder abuse in Dunn County, and a position of an advocate that would specifically be targeted towards working with those that are aged 50 and older. So what we need, if folks are willing to participate in this with us, is we would need letters of support, and he wants the gentleman at the DOJ who's writing the grant is hoping to get those by April 22nd. And he said that he has templates, he can pretty much just give us what he needs us to say. And you're free to edit those and signatures if folks are willing to move forward with this.
So specifically, Tracy, I know that you said that you needed letters of support from law enforcement, prosecutor.
Optional, but preferred is from the chief judge and also from our local domestic violence agency, which I will reach out to the Bridge to Hope. But those were and from DHS. So those were the specific letters of support that he was looking for.
And the commitment on the part of people that they ask is that they would then be involved in the subsequent training.
Yep.
Related to this enhanced approach to elder abuse investigating.
Correct. And the specific ask that he had is that police agencies would be willing to have at least 50% of their officers trained in the 2-year period. It could be more than that if the agency wanted all of their officers to be trained. That's something that could be arranged as well. But the specific ask was that they'd be willing to commit to at least 50% of their officers going through that training.
And it would be a couple of hours?
It's a total of 8 hours for the entire program, but he said it could be oftentimes what they've seen on the eastern side of the state is that it works well to do a 2-hour training. He said it's pretty flexible on how you break it up. There's different sections, like one section that's specifically about adult protection, one section that's about a financial exploitation, those sorts of things. So a lot of agencies just do one section at a time.
And it's DOJ led.
Correct. They would be administering the grant. Essentially the counties that participate would just be recipients of additional staff assistance and additional training. And there would be he was very clear, there would be no expectation for the county or the agencies involved to pay anything towards the training, that it would be fully funded.
Okay, except staff time.
Except staff time, correct.
Okay, that was my question. That it was there funding available for reimbursement, overtime reimbursement?
That was a question that came up, Sheriff, and unfortunately, he just got back to us yesterday. There is not.
So when Tracy was looking into this funding source and this position, I told her that she said, I don't know, I don't have already established relationships with the various partners. And I said, well, thankfully, we actually have a group that meets on a regular basis, and this might be a good opportunity to get everybody in one spot, just see if there was interest or if folks were willing to make a commitment for us to move forward or not, either which way. I don't, obviously we're interested by Tracy being here from a DHS standpoint, but if there is concern about the capacity for it, that's a legitimate concern. So thoughts from particularly the key stakeholders of law enforcement and prosecution in the court.
Tracy, can I ask a quick question? So you'd said about 50% of staff needs to be trained. Is that training the full 16 hours for all of that staff, or is it just 16 hours of training for the train the trainer program, and then we come back and then it's less than 16 hours?
The train the trainer program sounded like it would be held locally, but that's like a 2-day training.
Okay.
And the staff training is a total of 8 hours, but it would be broken up. Apparently some agencies do the full, just have a 1-day training and they do the full training, but others it worked better to break it up, and they did like 2-hour chunks at a time and had 4 separate trainings at a 2-hour time period. So there's flexibility on how that could be done. And again, it's a 2-year period to get that training accomplished. So it doesn't have to be done all at one time.
You can count me in. We'll get 50% of our staff done, and no problem.
Okay.
If you need a letter of support too, if you send me an address where I need to send it to, if you wouldn't mind doing that, that'd be great. We'll do
Yep.
letter of support and commit a trainer. And then we'll train at minimum 50% of staff, if not 100%.
Awesome. Okay. I know he was gonna have a template for the letter, so that piece should be pretty easy for us to put together.
Sure. Whenever you get it, count me in.
AC, same here from the sheriff's office. I'm honestly interested in training my entire staff on it. We come across these often and it's a difficult investigation sometimes. And so, yeah, if you can send me a template, then we'll certainly commit to training our staff.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Chief and Eric, and Sheriff. That's awesome to hear, because you're right. Our adult protective services numbers continue to increase every year.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Is Jim on the phone? Judge Peterson?
Yes. I haven't talked to the other judges, obviously, and I know Judge Meyer is on here, but I certainly would support this and be willing to submit a letter of support and be involved.
Thank you. And how about is Andrea on the phone, or Andrea on the call?
Yep, I'm here, and yep, my office would be looking forward to participating in that as well.
All right, awesome. Thank you,
Great.
all of you. It's a great
Thanks so much.
opportunity
And I have a follow-up meeting tomorrow, so I may have more. I'll email further information as I get it.
And you will get templates out to those partners to get letters of support in by the 22nd of April.
Yes, I will.
Awesome. So maybe since Sarah put this as a action item for the CJCC, we could also, Sarah, if you were willing to draft, or we can use one of the templates as a draft, a letter of support from the CJCC at large. If there would be support of that, I would entertain a motion to have the CJCC create a letter of support for this Adult Protective Services grant opportunity.
Kevin Biggs so moves.
Second.
Any discussion about that?
Who just seconded? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Judge Peterson.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. All right, Tracy, you're welcome to hang out with us if you want to, or you can go away.
I think I'll sign off, but I just want to thank you all for your support, and I will be in touch.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. Let's move back to our, well, actually, let's take on our other guests for this meeting. This is a systems mapping for domestic violence convictions and firearm surrenders. Chief, do you want to tell us the background story and introduce your guests?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have guests from the Battered Women's Project is here with us. And one of their goals is to help ensure that we can get or take firearms out of the hands of convicted persons of domestic violence. And we have some great laws here in the state. Whereas what we'd like to do, though, is shore up that process to ensure that those firearms are removed. And they'd like to talk a little bit about the program and then offer us assistance so that way all the systems partners can work together to make sure that this is accomplished and thus prevent further violence and homicide here in our state. So I'm going to introduce a couple of our guests here. We have Amy Sanchez, who is the executive CEO, if I have that right, executive director. All right. Then we have Alicia Nichols, who is, you're the project manager, if I'm recalling correctly as well. All right. And I have not met Anton Tripolsky yet, but welcome to the meeting. Thank you for being here and giving us your time and offering up some of your expertise. So I'm going to turn it over to those folks. Thank you.
Chief, thank you so much. We are so excited to be here with all of you today. I just have to say really quickly, Chris, you have a very well-behaved furry friend behind you. unlike mine. I have had to turn my camera off several times I have an 11-month-old French bulldog. And it's like having a toddler again. And so I've been chasing him all. So kudos to you. I think I might need some notes.
It's actually my son is driving, I'm riding, it's his dog, and he's whining, but apparently not loud enough for you all to hear. So
well, I thought he was doing beautifully. I have a terror in my house. Well, again, my name is Alicia Nichols. I serve as the Deputy Director of the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence and Firearms, which, as the Chief said, is a project of the Battered Women's Justice Project. We are headquartered we were in Minneapolis up until August of 2021, when we relocated to St. Paul. I myself am just outside of St. Paul in the suburb of Woodbury. My colleague Anton Trapolsky is an attorney advisor with the Battered Women's Justice Project. He is in New York City. And my wonderful and fearless leader, Amy Sanchez, is also on the west side of St. Paul, so in the suburbs. But we are so thankful for you all sharing your time with us. Amy and I had a wonderful opportunity to meet with the sheriff and with the chief on March 11th over lunch, just to learn a little bit more about your community. And as the chief has said, you've got some great laws in your state. And I will just say, unfortunately, the director of my team is Dave Keck. He could not be with us today. He is doing a training for the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. So he is there. But Dave is a resident of Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Dave was a magistrate for a number of years, or excuse me, a commissioner for a number of years in Wisconsin. And in the early aughts, he piloted a domestic violence firearm surrender protocol in his small, tiny room in Winnebago County, I believe it was. And so eventually that pilot was so successful that it did become state law in 2014, and in Wisconsin is known as the SAFE Act. And so you all, Amy and Anton and I already know that Wisconsin is a strong force to be reckoned with when it comes to responding to domestic violence and firearms. And so we just are so thankful for the opportunity to share the news of a grant award that we received from the Joyce Foundation. And if you will humor me here for a minute, while I know we are 2.5 years into all of these Zoom meetings, but yet sometimes with my double monitors, the sharing of my screen can get tricky. So I am just wondering, can somebody, one of the hosts of this meeting, give me co-host rights just temporarily so I can share my PowerPoint? Thank you so much.
Alicia, while you're getting that set up, I just wanted to say personally, so I have a personal motivation about Menominee, Wisconsin. I was born and raised in Menominee, Wisconsin. My parents still live in Menominee, Wisconsin, graduated from Menominee High, all that stuff. And so when this opportunity came up for BWJP to be able to work in 4 communities, and we wanted the communities to be very diverse, I just kept bugging Alicia. We gotta do Menominee, we gotta do Menominee, we gotta do Menominee. So my parents are Ron and Joan Sanford. I don't know if any of you know them, but my dad was a teacher at the high school forever. And for me, just personally, I am not a firearms expert, but for me personally, I'm just really proud to be here and to work with all of you because it's very personally very, very fulfilling. So just wanted to give you all that connection as well, and I'll turn it back to Alicia.
Thank you. And I will just say with that, she didn't have to do too much convincing. When Dave and I and Amy started talking with our colleagues from around the country and connecting with domestic violence advocates and coalitions, the Wisconsin coalition was very, very loud and clearly saying, we have a really, really solid team here, from court to our law enforcement. We have really strong relationships, and we would encourage you very, very strongly to work with Dunn County and Menominee. So you've got lots of fans. I want you to know you've already done great work, and we would love to be a part of continuing to help you do that. So I'm going to see if I've got my share screen function. It looks like I do. Let's see. The problem will just be, like I said, getting the correct screen to show there. Okay. Amy or Anton, can one of you please so kindly do me a favor and tell me exactly what you see on your screen? Do you see it presenter mode?
We just see your desktop,
Oh,
Alicia. So
well,
we see
that's
like
not
your
what you want.
toolbar below.
You
Yeah,
don't
but
want that.
so it's not presenter mode. We see, but we
It's
do
not
see the
presenter mode.
slides.
Mhm.
Mhm. Now it's presenter mode.
Okay, let's do this. How's that?
That's good. We see your
Yep,
toolbar
that
below,
looks
but it's
good.
fine.
Okay, all right. Here we go, everybody. Okay, so just a little bit of a quick acknowledgement here. So we have this opportunity through the Joyce Foundation. The Joyce Foundation has been around for more than 25 years, and their commitment really is to understanding research and education and policy solutions around reducing gun violence and increasing safety in communities. So this grant in particular was looking at responding to domestic violence and firearms in the Great Lakes states. It is a 12-month grant opportunity. We are 4 months into it at this point. It began in January. We have $200,000 over the course of the 12 months to work very specifically with 4 communities. And those 4 communities, again, we selected the communities based on a commitment that we had heard to the issue of domestic violence and firearms, but also what was really, really important to us and is a key that we find to successful surrender is having all of the necessary stakeholders engaged in the process. And this, I mean, this virtual room right here is a great example of how you all, and even the things that you've just accomplished on your agenda today is a great example of how you all have pulled together all of the disciplines that intersect with domestic violence and have the potential to increase safety around gun violence as well. So we selected communities very specifically that had stakeholders that were interested in, that were engaged, and really were wanting to look at creative ways at disarming abusers as well. So the sites are Washtenaw County, Michigan, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Cuyahoga County, Ohio, which is the Cleveland area, and then of course you all in Menominee, Wisconsin, or what we hope can be something that we can look at countywide for you all. The project goals. The Joyce Foundation was really, really interested in helping us to build what we're calling this community of practice, right? So the idea is that as we have folks who have attempted and been successful at developing firearm surrender protocols or disarming domestic violence offenders, bringing those folks together with other communities and disciplines and professions that are also interested in doing that same work, bringing those folks together, having opportunities to discuss what the strengths are, what some of the barriers may be, looking at troubleshooting and problem solving. Right there just is something so positive that can come from being with folks who are like-minded, who are committed to the same issue as you are, and who can really be creative and who are willing to explore other ways that we can keep survivors safe. So this idea of building opportunities to connect all 4 of these communities, including your community, with other communities who have done this, but also others who are right, like Minneapolis, who is looking at responding to domestic violence and firearms through credible messengers and violence interrupters. We're working with Ohio, who is looking at disarming abusers through the criminal justice system, but also has a really strong interest in looking at public health approaches to intervening in the violence. So again, the idea of building this community of practice so that we're not all in this, that we don't feel like we're operating right in silos and alone. The second goal is, of course, to identify the promising practices and any types of policy change that we can. What Dave and I tend to find when we travel around to jurisdictions and talk about domestic violence and guns is that a lot of states have really, really strong laws already in place. And it really is figuring out the logistical pieces. One of the conversations, Sheriff, if you don't mind if I share this with the group, when we had lunch, one of the conversations you and I had was streamlining the process from when an order to surrender is on the record. How is it that you and your officers or your deputies are going to know that there has been a surrender order? And what are the different types of pieces that we can put in place to make sure that that happens, and to make sure that someone has actually disarmed themselves? And that could look like issuing a compliance hearing and placing the burden, rightfully so, on the defendant or the respondent to prove that they have in fact dispossessed themselves. So just an example of looking at different ways, because we all know that laws get created, and the logistical practical steps of how that actually is going to happen isn't always handed to us. And so this is an opportunity for us to develop this together. We also, we have selected, as I've said, 4 to 5 diverse communities. We've got urban and rural folks represented. We have folks who are operating like you all under state law. We have Ohio, who is operating solely under federal law. So we've got some differences in the work that we're doing. But I would be preaching to the choir, and so I won't go into it too much, but we all know that we are rebounding from a pandemic. There has been significant social unrest in our country, and is still happening in very actively in communities. And so there's been a lot of conversation about what it means for alternatives to the criminal justice system. I myself am, in addition to being a domestic violence and sexual assault advocate, I also am a restorative justice practitioner. And so when I hear alternatives to the criminal justice system, I perk up, because I get concerned about what that might mean. Because alternatives should not equate to that we don't enforce accountability for people who cause harm. So the idea around alternative approaches for us has really been about what are other ways in which we can intervene and we can capture some of these guns. And so an example of that, the work that is happening right now in Minneapolis, we know that they're credible messengers and violence interrupters, are on the streets, and they're talking with members in the community. And they received a phone call from someone. This was not domestic violence related, but they received a phone call from someone, for example, and he said, "I'm being pressured to commit this shooting. I have to go and do this. But I know if I don't have my gun, I can't do it. I need someone to take the gun." And then he gave his gun to someone else. So thinking just about other ways in which we can create safety for victims and their children, but also creating safety for men who are and those who are using violence in their relationships. This is really about de-siloing some of the work and looking at violence interrupters, looking at suicide prevention and safe storage. There are lots of opportunities for us to look outside sort of our immediate circle and lean into some of the other strategies and approaches and figure out if they can work for us in keeping victims of domestic violence safer. And last but not least, it's to raise public awareness about the need, to implement these policies and restrict domestic abusers' access to guns. We know that domestic violence offenders who have access to guns, that it increases the risk for lethality. And we know that there are other things that we need to be looking at around survivor safety that don't only that doesn't only involve separation of the parties, but can also look at how do we intervene, how do we look at what some of the root causes are of violence, including what the historical legacies of racism and oppression within the legal system and in broader society has been. So we have 4 very, very lofty project goals. But I'm very, very confident that we can do this. Really quickly, just a rundown again of the project staff associated with this is Dave Keck, who has experience. He is an attorney, was a former commissioner and has experience right, implementing and enforcing domestic violence, firearm surrender. I've been a victim advocate for nearly 20 years, working in sexual assault, domestic violence, and also homicide. Before coming to BWJP, I spent 6 years working in corrections with men who were serving life sentences for domestic violence, homicide. Christine Lizdiz is our Director of Public Policy. And of course, the great Anton Trapolsky is an attorney advisor. And Amy Sanchez, our Executive Director, is always just a phone call away. And I know with Menominee in particular, as she has shared with you, it has special meaning for her. So I know that she's going to want to be involved in this one as much as she can. We do have a great advisory board. I'm going to kind of just breeze through the rest of this really quickly here because I'll send you this information as well. But we have an advisory board that has been comprised of folks from community violence prevention, domestic violence, public health, and these are folks who have also implemented firearm surrender in their communities and can be of a great resource to all of you. I don't think I said law enforcement, but of course we have law enforcement. So really quickly, just a couple of the things around training and technical assistance that we're looking at with communities, of course, is developing surrender protocol. We can provide training and education around simply the intersection of domestic violence and guns. We are the home of the National Center on Protection Orders in Full Faith and Credit. So we have colleagues who can assist with the enforcement of protection orders and identifying the presence of guns on those orders. Victim notification is always an issue. And we can talk about some safety planning, but there's a variety of different things that we can do, all really rooted in what it is that the realities are in your community. We will be providing on-demand training. You'll have access to all of our online learning in our online learning management system. We are currently offering webinars for all of the communities and participants the 4th Tuesday of every month. We know that you're busy and that you won't be able to attend all of those. So Anton has been a great help to me in making sure that we are keeping all of the webinars archived and we're recording them and making them available immediately after to everyone. So you can watch those on demand. We will be hosting an in-person convening to bring everyone together here in St. Paul. And the piece that I'm also really excited about is this institutional analysis and mapping. And Anton will be able to provide some additional information about that in the next week or so via email. But the idea is right, is to map out our system to see where it is, where are we really strong, where can we improve, right, and understanding from victims and survivors what they need this process to look like as well. And that can come out in some of the institutional analysis and mapping piece. Our outcomes, right? We're creating this community of practice. You'll be meeting, right now we're meeting virtually with everybody. You will be able, as I just mentioned, to engage in some institutional analysis work long-term. You know, Dave and I know that this work doesn't happen in a day or in a year. And so even after December 31st, when this grant expires, we're not going anywhere. We are still here and we are committed to working with you and your community and increasing safety for survivors from gun violence. So we'll work with you as long as you will have us. One of the final reports, we hope to be able to assist each one of the communities with an action plan. We know that at the end of this, you may not have a full surrender protocol in place, but we want for you to be able to have a roadmap as to where you've been and where it is that you want to go and take this. And we'll provide that information to the Joyce Foundation with the hope that we can replicate all of the great work that we've done. And that is the end of the presentation. It's a lot of information. I know I went through it quickly, but I know how busy you all are. Question
from the group.
Just point of clarification, you know, and this system isn't looking at taking away anybody's constitutional right to have a firearm. It's only to support our existing laws and practices on making sure if a judge orders a firearm surrender, you know, the sheriff's office is notified either that they're supposed to be coming in here to turn them in. I just happened to look up in the last 2 years, we've only had one firearm surrender case. And so I don't think we're going to have a large quantity of them, but if the judge orders them to surrender them to a family member, we have no idea of that. And if there's, you know, follow through for how they prove that they've done that. So.
Sheriff, I am so sorry. I think my internet connection must be unstable because I missed a good portion of, you were all frozen. You all looked beautiful, but you were all frozen. So I apologize, but I just heard the tail end of that. But would you be so kind just to give me a little bit more snippet? I want to make sure I responded correctly.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I just, to point out, you know, we're not looking at taking away anybody's constitutional rights to have a firearm. It's just an assistance on following through with current state law and the practices of you know, getting from a judge's order to surrender firearms either to us or to a family member that's followed through with, and we're notified and things along that line. And is there proof that John Doe turned over his firearms to a family member as he was ordered to by a judge and things like that? Because in the last 2 years, I went back to January 1st of 2020, and we've only had one firearm surrender case. So I don't think it's a large bulk that we're dealing with, but out of these domestic abuse restraining order stuff, I don't know how many on our end are actually seen by our department that are ordered to turn over to a family member or something. And if they have to prove that, we don't know.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for repeating. You were exactly right. It was an excellent clarification. This is not a gun grab. We know, and research shows us that domestic abusers are prone to escalate in their violence and that it leads to lethality. And the presence of a gun increases lethality by 11 times. And so this isn't a gun grab. This really is, we know that domestic abusers have been proven to be dangerous, and weapons increase the likelihood of danger. And so that we want weapons from them because, right, they've been through the process. They've had due process. We, you know, we want this to be by the book, and we're not trying to capture or catch anyone either. We want the safety of the abuser is of equal importance to us as it is the victim's safety.
Are there other questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. So this is Sarah. I'm wondering what the ask is, I guess, of us here, if we're interested in participating in this.
Yes, the ask is that, and Anton is going to follow up. And so please don't feel you have to be jotting all of this down. Anton will follow up with a rather lengthy email for all of you. But the ask really is that you come along on this journey with us, that you participate in the webinars, that you have an opportunity to hear and to learn from others as to what it is that they're doing that you might be able to try in your community, to share what you're learning. We're sort of asking a state of the union. We would love to be able to know, you know, part of what Kevin and the chief and I had a conversation about was what's currently happening, right? So you all helping us learn about where some of the challenges and where the gaps are, so that we can, so that we can help seal that gap, so that we can provide some of the documentation or the templates to be able to create the process. The expectation, really the outcome, is to commit to the institutional analysis and mapping, being able to get feedback and information from victims about, right? We are in this virtual room and we are here because of survivors. And we can create every process that we want, but if it isn't accessible for a survivor, right? We've not done our jobs. And so the commitment really is to help us examine what's going on in your community and identify a road for you to be able to increase survivor safety from firearms violence. And then a commitment to the in-person convening in St. Paul. We're looking at doing that in July. There, of course, we will take care of any financial obligation and expenditures to get you to Minnesota. So there is some financial support available as well.
It's a really long drive.
This yeah, a long time. This is Amy. I think the thing that excites me about Menominee and Dunn County specifically is that it really is us working directly with the sheriff and with the chief, right? And really having law enforcement being actively involved in this. Oftentimes, you know, you have advocates kind of from the outside saying, systems people, listen to us, right? And that can only get you so far. And so for me, the value of your group, right, is that you all represent different really important pieces of a system, right, that surrounds the community. And so having all of you know what's going on, and having the solutions, the opportunities and the solutions coming from both the sheriff and the chief and their staff, I think is really interesting and amazing. And it's a different way of looking at this. So that would be the other piece that I would throw in there. The power of you all work. You know, you naturally some local communities get grants from the federal government. You know, the grant that you were talking about, the elder abuse grant. I'm almost sure that's coming from the Office of Violence Against Women, from DOJ, the feds. They also give grants to do community coordinated response, right? Which is what you really are, right? Is different components of systems working together within a local jurisdiction, a local community. But you guys are doing it without a grant funding. You're doing it because it's important to Menominee. It's important to Dunn County, right? And that's, from my perspective, the most, you know, that's really super valuable. So really we wanted, you know, the chief really wanted to bring us here so that you all knew what was going on, that you guys could all, you know, get involved as you see fit. And that we really just took an opportunity to explain this, you know, this exciting project that we're working on with Menominee. So that would be the other piece I'd want to add.
Thank you, Amy.
One of my thoughts is for working with the Battered Women's Project is to help utilize their services through that system mapping to ensure that our processes are in place, that we're communicating when those orders are happening for offenders who have been convicted to surrender firearms, to make sure that they are out of their hands. And that's really where my focus and my great interest in their project came to play, and then presenting and wanting them to come and present here to this group, and then meeting with the sheriff and I to discuss this. So I think our laws are good. I just want to make sure that we're communicating as effectively as we can, and then following through as effectively as we can, so we can minimize the opportunity for victims to fall prey of homicide. And I think we can all agree that that's a good thing. So that's what I'm hoping for out of it, that this group would support that, and we could work towards that here in the next year and a half to shore up that process, if that works for everybody.
So would it be accurate to say that we would be looking for the CJCC to endorse Dunn County's involvement in this project?
Yeah, I think that would be a fair assessment, that we would endorse and agree to work together to try to make improvements on communications or the mapping. That's what I'd like to see happen. And if it needs a motion, I would certainly move for that.
Well, since we've got it slated for an action item, I think that would be a action. Eric, if you'd be willing.
Yeah, I'll put that
Okay.
forward.
All right. So we have a motion to endorse Dunn County's involvement in this domestic violence convictions and firearms surrender project. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, a second by Judge Peterson. Any other discussion or questions?
Thank you, Judge, for seconding that.
Otherwise, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries.
Wonderful.
right.
Thank you, everyone.
We have a few
Thank
minutes
you.
to sit
Thank
through
you.
some items. Thank you to our guests and presenters and for thinking of Dunn County for this initiative.
Well, and thank you so much for sharing all of your time with us
you.
today. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for all of the work that you are already doing and are continuing to do. And we'll let you have your time back, and you can anticipate hearing from Anton and I via email very shortly. But thank you again so much. Be safe, be well, and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, we're circling back to 6A, the digital evidence system grant. And Sarah, would you fill us in on that?
Yes, so we did have a meeting with IT, the Menominee Police and the Sheriff's Office regarding, and the District Attorney's Office as well, regarding our grant that we have funds set aside for a digital evidence system. The funds are available through June 30th. So the recommendation out of the group really was to, the idea of getting a different system outside of our existing system would create more work for staff to really have to utilize two different systems of uploading, downloading. The idea that, the funds, we had about $13,000 set aside. It's not enough to really sustain an digital evidence system beyond this first year. So the recommendation from the small group was to utilize the funds to purchase removable storage devices, so thumb drives and hard drives for the law enforcement agencies to really upload that material for the district attorney's office, and for the district attorney's office to share that as well with prosecutors or defense. So since that meeting, there has been an unmet need related to a purchase that we already made with the CSEF grant. We purchased some laptops for all the squad vehicles for the sheriff's office, but they need an additional component to make them safe for computers. So those components for all of the devices is about $3,000. So that would, what I'm asking for here is that that we get approval to ask for a grant modification to include the additional safety needed for those laptops to be operational. It's almost a must. And then utilize the rest of those funds to purchase hard drives and the disk material for the district attorney's office to really dole out as appropriate.
Right, so I would look for a motion in support of requesting a grant modification for those items.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Motion by Eric, second by Dave. Any discussion or questions?
If I could just add, I just was wondering what the how the motion would be worded. I have to email Sarah, but my office purchased some sanction software where we can play a video recording and then put the transcript from the recording underneath for trial purposes. And I'm thinking that that might fall under the digital evidence grant as well. So if we could just phrase the motion a little bit broadly, I don't know if we need to, in the event that I'm able to recoup those costs that we spent last year on it.
I think the motion as proposed was just for approval of a grant modification. So if you want to work with Sarah behind the scenes to see if that sanction software would qualify, I would say that would be fine.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I don't think we have approval. All those if in support, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. All right, just have a couple of minutes left. We were going to, so Sarah, see what kind of impact you can make with areas on the medication assisted treatment grant and the SMASH board. You can come back to SMASH. whenever our next would be, early June, end of May, next meeting.
Yeah, so those are going to be new oversight areas, I guess, just as far, we did receive the Department of Justice medication assisted treatment grant for jail. So we're already kind of working on that. I'll do an overview at our CJCC meeting, so you'll hear more specifics about that, but really we're looking to contract those services for the jail. And then the criminal justice smash board. So as I mentioned, it's in your packet. Hope that you can kind of dive in, but we will cover some of the highlights at our CJCC meeting as well. And that is scheduled for April 14th at 4 o'clock. So just next week. So we can just kind of punt those to next week. And then we do have a number of meetings coming up in the future. So just trying to keep us all on track. And I know we've got a lot of the same folks participating in all those meetings. So really just trying to harness those in a little bit. I do have I just want to plant the seed that as we're developing these, the methamphetamine strategies work group and the COSUP work group, we might want to consider not having them as work groups where they're publicly noticed and publicly broadcasted. We may want to consider having them as teams, work teams, like we do with our drug endangered children team, because, you know, we find there's a lot more discourse, there's a lot more back and forth, there's a lot more discussion, and we have a lot of kind of internal work to do at times and internal discussions before we're really, I think, kind of broadcasting out. But we are part of, we did have the Corp Council a couple of years ago look at our meetings, and he determined that they should be publicly noticed if they're a work group. So that's just something to consider. And I'll stop talking at this point.
This is Eric. I would support adjusting them to teams just because of the nature of them. There's a lot of intricate moving parts between the different organizations. And some of it is just kind of learning what our capabilities and capacities are. So as we try to work through and problem solve different issues, I don't think the public would certainly be all that interested in the logistics of it. They're more interested in what is going to be actually the activity and then the potential outcomes and outputs. So I think adjusting it to teams makes a lot of sense. So I'm definitely in favor of doing that. I'm not sure if that needs a vote or a motion, but that is, I feel that that's a good move. And thank you for that suggestion, Sarah.
So I believe that in a previous action of this group, we established them, but did we establish them specifically as work groups, Sarah?
Yeah, so the last meeting we did establish them as work groups. So they are slated to go to the CJCC for approval next week.
Okay, so we don't have it scheduled as an action item for this particular meeting to change their status.
We could do that for the CJCC meeting.
Yeah, I think it'd be appropriate.
Do an amendment at the CJCC, since they are the final endorser. We could offer an amendment to establish them as teams at that meeting. That seems like that would work. Who's going to object? Okay. All right, so you have in the minutes, the next meetings that are on the calendar. Anything else that we need to address for the good of the group before we're done?
Not on my side.
All right, thank you all for being a part of today's meeting, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.